Right now, a nationwide debate is underway concerning the Zamboni or liberation treatment for multiple sclerosis. It's the controversial new treatment that involves mechanically widening the veins, and it is not available in Canada. Neither Canadian MS physicians nor the MS Society of Canada have advocated for publicly funded trials or immediate access to the treatment. Yet the debate continues about whether they should. And the reason it does is largely because of the number of MS patients who massed together via social media groups like Facebook and demanded it. Dr. Roger Chafe is director of the Janeway Pediatric Research Unit. He and his colleagues recently published an article on the issue in the journal Nature called The Rise of People Power. He joins Josh now in the studio.
Well, thanks very much, Aaron, and welcome to the show, sir.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks for coming in. How much of an effect has public pressure, had on government and researchers, to have publicly funded trials for MS treatment, liberation treatment, or maybe even offer the treatment right out?
Well, I think it's played a huge role. One of the things is that if it was just based on the science, I don't think we'd be talking about this. It's interesting, there's the extent that the controversy is here in Canada. It's starting to kind of spread around the world, but certainly it hasn't become a political issue in other countries as it has here. And that has to do with a lot, to a great extent, patients and members of the public and their supporters advocating for this procedure.
It's hard for us to imagine that this hasn't been a worldwide news story, not in every country, because we have seen so much of it go on in this country. Do you think that's because, social networks, internet, is just more readily available in this country than some other foreign countries, or what do you think it has to do with?
It's not necessarily that. I mean, some of the things that people point to is the prevalence of MS in Canada, but other countries have equally high or even higher prevalences of MS. Other groups of patients certainly have equal access to Facebook. So there's a number of different aspects to it. One has been the coverage of the procedure in the traditional media, particularly some of the original media was very positive and some would say one-sided. But after that, we did see social media and Facebook and YouTube really pushing for this procedure in a way that was fairly unprecedented.
What do you think about the reason researchers and the like are wary of supporting the liberation treatment is partially has to do with the fact that, well, they don't really know if it works, and they're also somewhat nervous. They say they're somewhat nervous about the health risks that could happen to the patients who get it. With that in mind, what are the pros and cons of people now having the ability to influence research priorities in this country or around the world because of social media, do you think?
Well, I think ultimately it's a positive thing. Social media has given patients, first of all, an avenue to learn a lot more about the conditions. It allows people to network much better amongst patients. But there are concerns. I don't think anyone's been really served well, either supporters of the liberation procedure or critics of it, by how this debate has played out in social media. There's a nasty tone to it. Instead of kind of coming at it from the perspective of does this procedure work? What are the risks? Let's try to evaluate them and see what they are. It's been more of a political campaign where one side is arguing against another, a lot of times making very personal claims against each other. So even though social media wouldn't want to say it's a bad thing, but I think how we see it played out with the liberation therapy is a cautionary tale. And if I guess the problem is how do you figure out what's the best way to engage the public through these social media?
Well, what do you think about the route this province has taken? They come out and they're certainly not paying for people to go get the treatment, but they have said that they will monitor the condition of the people who do make that decision themselves and pay for it themselves to go get the liberation treatment. What do you think about the route chosen there?
Well, I sympathize with the Minister of Health. I'm sure he's hearing things on both sides. First, that from scientists and the clinical community saying that there is not much evidence for this procedure. On the other hand, I'm sure he's hearing, as all of us have heard, first-hand accounts of patients who've gone over and say they really benefited from this. I think under that pressure, they've set up a registry, and that seems to be one step, and hopefully it'll contribute to kind of giving the pros and cons of this procedure. But I still think at the end of the day, when we get the results of this registry, that's only going to be a small step forward. There's still going to be lots of questions around whether it's effective and whether it's not, what are the risks associated with it.
Well, when you look at, this is probably one of the first times, in my memory anyway, that we've seen people really call for such demand of a treatment, maybe just because now they have the power to do it because of social media groups. What lessons do you think the Canadian government and researchers should take, knowing now that people have this power?
Well, there's a big question whether this is something unique in terms of the level of media attention and political attention that we have around this procedure. It's often, I think, whatever disease you have, you can go online and find someone who's claiming that some alternative therapy is there, that is usually backed up by patient claims that this works. But it's kind of sussing out what's the reality here. Why, social media is a really good way of finding out about things. It's actually a very hard environment to assess things, especially in terms of medical procedures, in terms of what benefits people actually really did have, and what are the long-term outcomes. And and one of the things with liberation therapy, there's always a question of, we've heard about patients having benefits from it. How many people never had a benefit from it? And they seem to be underreported in the social media. So it's a real challenge of, this is where a lot of our health conversation is taking place. It's where patients are going for information. The question is, we know that we have to kind of better engage with the social media. It's difficult to think about what's the most effective way to do that. So
it'll be an ongoing discussion for sure.
It certainly will be.
On that topic. Do you think there's anything, we've only got a short bit of time left, but just about multiple sclerosis itself that may have garnered this much attention? It's a bit of a unique disease in a number of ways. Do you think that may have fueled the fact that people got behind such social media groups so much?
To a certain extent. The nature of the disease, certain forms of the disease are you have relapses and remissions. That is part of it. It's a horrible disease, and I think there's a lot of red flags around the procedure that need to be addressed. But it is a horrible disease that we do hope that people would be able to benefit from new procedures. With regard to it, it also has a history of a lot of alternative treatments that have panned out ultimately not to work. So,
all right. No, thank you very much, sir, for coming in and speaking with us. Can you tell us about what you think about this topic, and also, of course, about the liberation treatment? Do you think it should be available in Canada? Here's how you can get in touch with us.
We like hearing from you, so let us know what you think of tonight's show. Leave your name and number, and we may just broadcast those comments. Call us at 757-9600 or drop us an email, outofthefog@rci.rogers.com.